The coffee of welcome. In the heart of the Arabian desert, where the dunes stretched endlessly like golden waves, there was a small village where tradition meant everything. It was a place where the harshness of the desert was softened by the warmth of its people. A young traveler named James found himself in this village one blistering afternoon, his face red from the sun and his throat parched from the long journey. James had come to explore and learn about cultures he had only read about in books. His guide, Yusuf, led him through the dusty paths between low, clay houses, their walls the same color as the sand. At the door of one home, Yusuf stopped and gestured for James to follow. "We are guests here," Yusuf said with a knowing smile. "You will see how we welcome strangers." The moment they stepped inside, the air cooled. The house was simple, mats on the floor, cushions for sitting, but it carried an unspoken elegance. An older man, tall and proud, stood to greet them. His face was weathered by years of sun and wind, his white thobe pristine, and his gutra draped perfectly across his head. This was Muhammad, the host. "Assalamu alaikum," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Wa alaikum assalam," Yusuf replied, and James repeated the words hesitantly. Muhammad's eyes lit up at the young traveler's attempt. Without another word, he gestured for them to sit on the cushions that lined the room. James sank into one, observing the quiet ritual that was beginning to unfold. A small fire crackled in the corner, and beside it sat a dala, a traditional Arabic coffee pot, its curved spout gleaming in the light. Muhammad carefully poured a golden liquid into tiny, handleless cups. The smell hit James immediately, rich, earthy, with hints of cardamom. "This is kahwa," Yusuf whispered. "Arabic coffee. It is a tradition as old as the desert itself." Muhammad handed the first cup to James, his expression serious yet kind. Yusuf nodded toward him. "You must take it with your right hand. It is a sign of respect." James obeyed, fumbling slightly but managing to hold the delicate cup properly. He sipped cautiously. The coffee was unlike anything he had tasted before, bitter, yet fragrant and oddly soothing. Muhammad watched him closely and smiled when he saw the slight nod of approval. "This is how we show hospitality," Yusuf explained. "To share coffee with a guest is to honor them." As Muhammad poured for everyone, James noticed another custom: the cups were never filled to the brim. "Why is that?" he asked. Yusuf smiled. "It is our way of inviting you to stay. If the cup were full, it would mean, drink and leave. A small serving shows that you are welcome to sit, talk, and enjoy the company." Muhammad began to speak in Arabic, his voice steady and calm. Yusuf translated as the old man told stories of travelers who had come through the desert, of how offering coffee and dates to strangers had once been a matter of survival. "The desert can be cruel," Muhammad said, his gaze distant, "but generosity must always be greater than hardship. A man's worth is measured not by what he owns, but by what he gives." James listened, humbled. He watched as Muhammad's young son entered with a tray of fresh dates, placing them carefully in front of the guests. The sweetness of the fruit was the perfect contrast to the bitterness of the coffee, and James smiled at the boy in thanks. Hours passed as they sat together, speaking in broken words and shared smiles. James realized that this was more than just a drink, it was a bridge between people, a symbol of trust and friendship. When Muhammad finally poured the last round of coffee, he shook the pot gently to signal it was empty. Yusuf leaned toward James. "When the coffee is finished, it is time to take your leave. But you will always be welcome here." As they stood to go, Muhammad placed his hand over his heart and bowed slightly, a gesture of sincerity. James returned the gesture, feeling the weight of its meaning. Outside, the sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the dunes with streaks of orange and gold. "Did you enjoy the coffee?" Yusuf asked as they walked away. James smiled, his heart full. "It wasn't just the coffee. It was everything." Yusuf laughed softly. "That is our way. In the desert, the smallest cup holds the greatest welcome." And as the winds carried grains of sand across the quiet landscape, James knew he had been part of something timeless, a ritual born of both kindness and necessity, where the simplest things spoke the loudest truths.